Hello and welcome back to Mark's Garden UK. In this video I'm going to talk to you about biodiversity in the garden and how keeping your garden untidy will not only make life easier for you as a gardener, but it will also make life easier for the biodiversity in the garden. And I'm going to give you 7 specific examples of how that's happened in my garden. In other words, where I've left my garden a little bit untidy in order to help the biodiversity. And the first example I'm going to share with you is here. Now, I had last year a vegetable patch there and a vegetable patch there. I gave up on them because I decided veg growing this year wasn't for me, but it's left me with 2 mounds. On that one I've already added the turf that I dug out from the wildlife pond. And it's become a big mound of grasses and nettles and weeds. I can see dock and I can see lots of other different types of plant in there already. Now, most people would call those plants weeds, but they're not weeds if I've decided they can stay there. They're actually biodiversity. And in that mound, if I leave that all winter, as I will do, that will be a home for thousands of little invertebrates and possibly rodents. So there's one example. This is another. I've just pruned quite radically a huge shrub in the garden, and I only have one brown wheelie bin, and there's no way all this would fit in that wheelie bin. So what should I do with it? Well, my neighbour has a chipper, and I suppose I could ask him if I could borrow the chipper. But I've decided on an easier approach. I'm just going to pile it here on top of this second old veg patch, and it will just stay there all winter. And these leaves will fall off and drop down and rot away, and the bacteria is part of the biodiversity. And again, that bacteria will get into these twigs and branches and multiply, and that bacteria is the bottom end of the food chain, which the invertebrates eat. And then those invertebrates are eaten by slugs and snails and frogs and birds. So already we're well on our way to creating a little biodiverse environment just on this small patch of earth here. I'm just trampling it down a bit because the more contact things have with each other, I think the better it is for that biodiversity to take off. Now, a lot of people wouldn't have a garden like this. They'd think it was too untidy and too messy. Well, I don't care. This is my garden, and I'm prepared to let some places stay messy and untidy in the interests of biodiversity. And also, it's a bit of a cheat for me because it makes my life a lot easier. Just throwing that on top of there. Now, I've got a ride-on mower, and if I go neatly around the edges of this and make a nice square cut in the grass, it'll make it look deliberate, and I can then say it's garden design. And in fact, that's exactly what it is, because it's in my garden. I've designed it. I'll carry on piling that up, then I'll show you another example of biodiversity and how me being messy helps in my garden. Windfall apples. If I had £1 for every one of these windfall apples, I'd be quite a wealthy man. And if I had £1 for every time someone has said to me, oh, you can't leave those on the floor to rot, it's a waste of food, I'd also be a wealthy man. Well, my answer to that is twofold. Number 1, come and help yourself if you want them. You can take them for free. And number 2, it's not wasted food if nature's enjoying eating it. And every day I come down here and I'll see an example like this of a windfall apple that's been nibbled away by something, probably wasps, possibly a rodent in the night time, possibly a slug or a snail. That is biodiversity. It smells a little bit rancid. That smell is life. It's bacteria, again, biodiversity. And if I ride over a few of those in my mower and squash them down, that will encourage and aid that decay process. And I see decay as life. So I leave as many of these on the ground as I like. There they go. And we'll eat some of them, and there'll be a new crop next year. So there's another example of how being a little bit untidy, leaving the windfalls on the ground, is helping my garden in terms of biodiversity. The wasps Absolutely love them. And I love wasps. Back on the mower again for two reasons. The grass pile. Now, a lot of people wouldn't want it on display. I'm quite happy to see it on display. It's quite remote from the house or the cottage. But when I look out of the kitchen window into the garden, I can see birds on the grass pile pecking around. What are they looking for? They're looking for insects. So that is a home for insects. It's also good for birds. No doubt lots of other small creatures will be around that during the night, eating each other. And I'm afraid to say it, but nature is red in tooth and claw. It's about the survival of the fittest. And most of the things you see in the garden around nature is survival. Little insects and animals and invertebrates eating each other all the time. The second reason the mower is relevant is no mow May. Do you remember last year we spent all May not mowing our lawns? Why do we do that? For biodiversity. And in fact, I did no mow May, no mow June, July, August, September and October, and I didn't get round to mowing my lawn until the spring of this year. Now granted, it was hard work bringing it back under control this year, but I had 10 months of not mowing it last year, and having no mow on your lawn encourages all those different species of grasses and plants to come up and recover, and that encourages all the insects, the pollinators and all the biodiversity. I'm labouring the point, but it's a valid one. Making life easier in the garden is also making life easier and better for nature. Let's go and have a look at the next example. And the next two examples are here in the wildflower meadow, which is specifically designed for nature and biodiversity. And it was really easy. Making a wildflower meadow is easy. You don't need to enrich the soil because they appreciate well-drained, impoverished soil. So there's another example of easy gardening, which is good for nature. What do I do at the end of the year? Do I have to come and tidy it all up? No, I don't. I just leave it and it will all collapse and fall to the ground. And all these little varieties of different wildflowers will produce seeds. Those seeds will feed rodents and birds, and also they'll provide next year's crop of wildflowers. So we have a virtuous cycle. And these branches and leaves and twigs will land on the ground and rot down and feed the soil themselves. So it's kind of a cycle which feeds itself. Another example are these sunflowers. First time I've ever grown sunflowers. I'm quite pleased. I'm 6 foot tall, that must be nearly 9 foot. And I thought I'd bought short ones. I planted 3 different varieties. There they are. You can see some over there, some next to me. They're growing up through into this lovely damson tree. The damsons will be left on the tree for the birds. Some of them will fall on the floor for the rodents and the other animals. But these sunflower heads will also be left in situ. They'll grow up there, they'll dry out, and again, seeds for the birds in the winter time. And I may pull a few of those seeds out and germinate them and propagate them and grow next year's sunflower seeds. So there we are. Some more examples of how lazy gardening, if you like, makes it better for nature and biodiversity. Now, walking past this year's buddleias, which have been an amazing source of nectar for butterflies and increased biodiversity in the summer, I approach a bed of nettles, which I've left here deliberately. Now, I know people who hate nettles with a passion, and they'll spend a whole weekend pulling out their nettles and rooting through the soil to find the roots. Why? Just leave them. Because look, nettles have so many uses. You can use them in the kitchen, you can make tea, you can eat them like spinach, you can make plant food, and I'm being bugged by several insects. That's biodiversity, so I'm not going to complain about it. Anyway, nettles in the garden. Butterflies don't lay their eggs on their food source, which is the buddleia. Sorry, that felt like a stinging insect. I probably look like a mad professor. Anyway, let me get back to the plot. Butterflies don't lay their eggs on the food source. They lay their eggs on a host plant nearby. That's where your nettles come in. Now, Why do I encourage butterflies to a garden when they eat the cabbages? Well, that's not my problem because I don't have cabbages. But the butterflies lay thousands of eggs. Probably each butterfly might lay 5,000 eggs, and only 3 of them or 4 of them will reach an adult butterfly stage. The other 5,000 or 4,997 have gone into the food chain. Biodiversity. So that's why I will leave a patch of nettles in my garden. I'm going to escape this corner now because that insect is really getting on my nerves. Do you know that insect chased me around the garden for several minutes before I managed to shake it off? Anyway, I've gone inside now and got the Avon Skin So Soft. Do you remember Avon calling? Well, their moisturiser called Skin So Soft. It's also a brilliant insect repellent. So if it comes back, I'll spray a little bit around. I'll put the link to that. If I can find that on Amazon, I'll put it in the description box below. Brilliant stuff. I always take it on a holiday. Anyway, getting back to the plot. Biodiversity, making life easy, being lazy in the garden. I'm talking about the lawn. Now, from a distance, my lawn looks great. And I'm reminded of that saying, perfection is the enemy of good. Well, I don't need a perfect lawn. I know there are people who love a perfect lawn and they'll spend thousands of pounds and weekend after weekend making it perfect. I'm just not bothered. If I get up close to my lawn and have a look at any square foot, I can see grass, but I can also see moss and clover. Bees love the clover. And several other different varieties of plants in there. And they're only there because I don't cut it too often, and I don't keep it too short, and I don't put weed killer in it, I don't scarify it. So all that biodiversity under my feet is being helped by the fact that I'm being lazy. Well, that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it, but I do believe it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that little random run through the garden, looking at examples of how biodiversity and being lazy work together. I'll see you soon for some more gardening adventures. Bye for now.